everybody. How's it going? This is Ryan with Rigs of Death Metal. Today, my guest is Tom of Changeling and a whole slew of credits that I'm sure we'll touch on at least a handful of them. Some of you might know him from his work with work slash drama with Obscura, uh, as well as Defeated Sanity, who we've covered on this show before,
Yeah.
and personal highlight for me, touring with Belfagor. So,
Okay.
so Tom, how you doing, man?
Um, I was perfectly fine until you mentioned that drama. No, I'm just kidding. I'm good.
We won't dwell on that too much. I think
It's
enough's been
fine.
said about that. But
Yeah, I don't think so, but yeah. But dude, it's good to see you. Thanks for having me.
absolutely, man. I've been jamming some of the new Changeling tracks, and it's insane. First off,
Awesome. Thank you very much.
absolutely. I kind of to like my own default. Um, I tend to lean towards a lot of either old school or old school revival kind of death metal.
Right.
But I do find a lot of cool like newer albums that I'm like, okay, shit, this is where we're at now. This is the new bar. Um,
Well, I appreciate that for sure.
absolutely. And what was it? I'm trying to think which one of the singles it was that has like the solo that absolutely floored me. Um, I mean, it's all impressive. Like I
So
remember, what was it,
the first
Abyss?
single had a fretless solo, and then the second single had the fretted one. So maybe that helps.
It was Falling in Circles. That
Right.
solo, uh, there's a lot of economy picking. Like it flows so freaking fast, but there's still so much pick attack. Like it's
Oh,
still
thank you.
like it doesn't sound legato. So what what do you implement most? Like, are you an economy picking guy or alternate?
Neither.
Okay.
I'm a I don't know if I can give a blanket statement because, whatever works, whatever
Yeah.
the situation requires. Um, but I can tell you that whenever I'm put on the spot, I will be going for hybrid picking, most of
Okay.
all. So the pick attack that you're talking about is actually my finger plucking.
Wow. Okay.
A lot of
That's
the time, like not all the time, but
sure.
I think that's what we're talking about.
Gotcha. That's I think I've heard like Ale Levy talk about this a little bit, but like hybrid picking in general has been such a more widely adapted technique for metal in like the last really noticeably in the last few years, where before it was like, country players and then Zach Wild, and that was about it.
Mm.
And now it just seems like it's just such a normal part of the vocabulary. Um,
Yeah, it seems like that. I mean, I remember still like 10 years ago or so, it seemed like myself and I forgot his name, psychroptic guitar player. Can you help me
Joe
out here?
Haley?
Joe Haley, amazing.
Yeah,
It felt like we were kind of the only people in death metal
sure.
um, building our foundational technique on that, and well, apparently that's changed.
Yeah, it well, definitely more in like some of the newer like younger acts or more recently formed bands putting stuff out, a lot of the more technical and more progressive bands for sure.
Mm.
um you're not seeing it with a lot of like death metal or metalcore bands, but like the guys that are actually trying to push the boundaries musically and technically speaking, it's been very, very well adopted. It's um you see some bands doing like, throwing in the thump technique like Tosin, and you know like if any kind of well documented technique out there, they're eating it up, um which I love to
Yeah,
see.
I mean that's the the natural progression, right?
Sure.
I mean that's just how it goes.
Right. Which obviously our page is real focused on a lot of like, you know, very extreme like death metal, black metal, grindcore, all that stuff. And a lot of that stuff tends to have like a foot in the past a little bit. Um, so it is kind of cool to juxtaposition that with some more modern acts as a refresher, like, hey, you can push this and do really cool stuff too. Defeated Sanity is a good example of trying to push musicality while still being extremely brutal.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, well, I don't think we need to discuss the fact that Defeated are like the quintessential band in their niche, you know?
sure,
So, yeah, 100%.
absolutely. Also being a very gear centric page, I sometimes get down the rabbit hole of talking about fun stuff that I want to talk about before before like really delving into like the nerdy gear stuff. And
Yeah.
people give me crap for
Well,
that sometimes, but
maybe maybe you are going to be very unhappy with this interview then, because I am not not judging it at all, but I'm not a gear person at all.
hey, that's fine. um
Whatever you want to know, I will tell you. I will try my best.
yeah,
But
absolutely.
I saw because I wasn't familiar with your channel until recently, and then I checked it out, and I saw the interview you did with Vaughn from Defeated Sanity.
Yeah,
Seems like a really nice dude, by the way, and the way that you guys nerded out on like different amp models and Jackson models, and it's like I'm out of here.
sure, sure.
Very interesting, but I'm not in that world at
Oh,
all.
fair enough. We've had plenty of guests like that, and honestly, I consider this more of just a music podcast. Like if you're into metal, you're into guitar playing, then we still
Right.
got plenty to talk about.
Cool.
I I had a 3 hour long interview with John from Outer Heaven where I think we talked more about aliens than we did about gear. So it's fine. It's fine.
Okay, sure. Bring it.
Yeah. So from watching some of your playthrough videos and stuff like that, unless things have changed, seems like you're kind of, more of a Kemper guy. Is that still true or is that outdated?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I also used, I mean, I've been using a bunch of stuff, but the camper, which is right down here right
Yeah,
now, um, has been the mainstay of my rig, if there is such a thing, for the
sure.
past 10 years. Yeah.
Killer. I've got mine right here.
Right,
One
cool.
little
I haven't
place.
tried the little one yet, but I'm excited what the MK2 will bring.
Yeah.
And you know, I've been I've been in the box basically
Hmm.
for the past 20 years. I remember even when modeling was still like in its infancy, like quality wise. I One of the first actual real amps that I had was the Line 6 Veda,
Oh, I love
if
those
you remember that.
things.
Yeah?
Oh yeah,
I could
absolutely.
never get it to sound the way I wanted to, but
Mm.
just saying, like even back in the day, that must have been late 90s, early 2000s. I was
I,
going digital,
okay.
right? So I haven't like you mentioned Belfigor, so that was a situation where, everything is fully analog and
Mhm.
pushed to the max or past the maximum. But other than that, I haven't I haven't bought or owned a tube amp in at least 15 years.
Gotcha. And sorry, I'm like now it's stuck in my memory. The Veda that you had, was it the silver chassis one, like the all silver one, or is that the
The
second
what? The
one?
Veda?
Yeah, I might have played the second model.
I had the combo version, and it was a
Okay,
black
okay,
combo amp,
gotcha.
and it was, how one of the main advantages of going digital is just the weight for me,
Yeah.
right? Because my neck is fucked. I have two dislocated discs in my neck.
Oh God.
Um, and it's- the weight of an amp is a make it or break it scenario for me.
Sure.
And I remember going digital with the Line 6 stuff, and it weighed a fucking ton. It was a tank.
Oh,
So yeah, so now the camper was definitely a step up in that regard, and
Sure.
now like the neural DSP, what's it called, the
Quad
quad
cortex.
cortex,
Yeah.
right? And then the smaller version of that, I think that's all for me personally, going into exactly the right direction. I want to have my stuff in my pocket.
Yeah. Well, and they've even got there's so many pedal board sized power amps now too, if you're still wanting to run some kind of cab or whatever.
Sure,
Uh,
yeah.
like I've even got like a 60-watt one that's like the size of a standard guitar pedal that I'm using
Mm,
for, band practices and maybe shows.
yeah.
But yeah, no, technology is wonderful.
It's the coolest thing, and it's also for me personally very gratifying because I like when I grew up and when I had my first couple of years as a professional musician,
Mhm.
I I never felt part of the cool kids club. I mean,
Oh
I
yeah.
still don't, but um, like I would see guitar players in on the circuit, and everybody had their big pedal boards and their amps and their cabinets and everything, and I was never interested in that stuff. And also, I just felt like there was something broken with me because I never felt like I could perform the way I wanted to, having a pedal board in front of me.
Yeah,
And to this day, I hate pedals.
sure.
So it's just a personal thing, like not putting down anybody who's really into that stuff, you know. Um, but for me, it was also maybe it's one of the caveats of playing fretless guitar so much. I want to be completely in the zone, trying to get the intonation right and
Mm,
hearing every little thing, and just having to stomp on shit. To me, at certain points in the show, is just always taking me out of the experience.
right.
So the for me, I want to have this little thing in my pocket that I plug in, and then I don't have want to worry about patch changes or whatever it
Yeah.
is. I also enjoy playing live with people without a safety net, and have done that a bunch of times. But if that's the case, no click track, no nothing, no backing tracks, that's great. But then give me a two-channel setup,
Mm, right.
distorted, clean. Don't let me switch more than that. So that's basically my take on that.
I guess I'm kind of the midway point where
Mm,
I don't mind a pedal board, but I hate tap dancing like some people do.
yeah.
So whether I have, an assortment of pedals to where I would need a switcher to where it's like one button will make several changes for me,
Mhm.
or some kind of, modeler or something. I don't mind some. I want to hit one thing and not like three or four for, part to part. Like that's just
Yeah,
too much.
sure. Yeah,
Um,
one button is great. Just
absolutely,
one
absolutely.
button that goes to next thing, next
Yeah,
thing, next thing.
like
That's cool.
my dream rig has always been, some of those refrigerator racks that you would see with big bands
Mm,
where they have a drawer with all their pedals and things hooked up to a MIDI switcher. And out on stage, all they have is like their one big controller
mm,
making, switching all their analog cool,
right.
stuff, but with the
Yeah.
convenience of the digital. That would be the dream, but we're not there yet.
That sounds cool. If I had that, I would need to hire a person to operate that.
Hey, I've seen it. Like,
So,
yeah, some of those touring bands, like they don't even keep their switcher on stage. They have their tech do it.
I mean, makes sense if you can afford that kind of stuff.
Right.
Like, by all means, go for it.
Oh, it's some rock star shit for sure.
Yeah,
Like, no doubt
sure. And I
about it.
mean, I'm also a big fan of people who really utilize effects and switching and multiple, daisy chained effects units.
Hmm.
Tom Morello, um, Omar from the Mars Volta.
Oh yeah.
Um, awesome. Totally cool. But for me, that's why I'm saying, like, when I was still like finding my place as a player, I
Yeah.
never felt I belonged in that world because it just felt to me like there was something wrong with me for not being able to perform and be confident on stage, having a bunch of pedals in front of me.
Yeah.
And so the way that the musician scene has gone in the past couple of years, with I think now it's just the standard, especially in the more core-ish
Hmm.
metal genres and the more modern stuff, to just have everything going into a digital rig. Everything's
Oh yeah.
pre-wired and pre-programmed. And I'm like, yeah, uh, to me, that totally speaks. Doesn't mean that the music speaks to me, but that setup, that approach to me seems like a solution to a problem that I also had always.
Oh, absolutely. And it's definitely like more of a matter of, getting on and off stage as quick as possible, just being overall more practical.
Mm,
Um, it's interesting we've brought this up because it's just been a ongoing talking point that I just like bouncing off of everybody. Um, where it's what's more important at the end of the day, writing your music, focusing on your music, or trying to, chase the tone dragon where where you're never going to get it. You're never going to be 100% satisfied kind of thing. Just always on that tone search, and there's a little bit of validity to both. Like
mm,
I think some guys can't, which I know you've produced and mixed and stuff like that too. So I think the tone aspect almost is like a little bit more of a, put a producer hat on or something like that, as opposed to actually like, writing. Um I think it's just a matter of like, you know, what colors do you really need to paint with, right? Like what tools do
sure.
you need to make your vision happen? Um
Sure. Yeah.
I I always have a lot of respect for the guys that they don't need, phaser, chorus, flanger, all these different little, things. Like that's not, they don't need that for their vision. Um
Right.
and I don't know. To me, there's something commendable about that, whether it's, you know, jazz guy or, shredder or whatever. Um, but fun stuff's fun too, right? Like
Yeah.
there's guys that
Sure.
are like have that soundscapey kind of thing, like the guys you mentioned, or My Bloody Valentine, where it's, all more about texture,
Yeah.
right? Creating some kind of ambience, which
Yeah.
my brain doesn't even work like that. Like I don't have the vision for that kind of stuff. I love it. It sounds cool and I'll mess with that stuff, but I've never written anything like, that could sound like it could be in a you know, Panos Cosmatos movie or something like that.
Right.
Like,
Yeah. Love his movies too.
oh, they're so
Um,
good.
yeah, dude. Um, I almost kind of want to go on a tangent, talking
Go
about
ahead. Go on a side
Mandy and how
tangent, man.
awesome it is, but
Go for it. Absolutely. We
no,
fully
no, let's
encourage.
stay on focus. Like nobody needs us to talk about how awesome a movie Mandy is, but yeah, it's
The
fucking awesome.
greatest. I have the
Blew
soundtrack
my
on
mind.
vinyl.
Really awesome. Oh, cool.
It's so
But
good.
that might just be my favorite Nicolas Cage movie of all time too.
Yeah, that's fair to say. It's I have to sit and think. I would have to sit and think about if there's anything else I like as much, but I don't think there was ever a role written for him as well as that one. Like,
For sure, yeah, and it makes sense in the story, in the
yeah,
progression of the, what happens. So it's not like you're being taken out of the experience by him doing his usual thing, like in some
sure.
other movies. So yeah, I appreciate his artistry in the context of that movie most of all the things that I've seen him in. Um,
Absolutely. He
so yeah,
he's one of those actors that works best if you can just put him in something and let him just go fucking nuts.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
But
Also, yeah, the soundtrack was great for sure. And I think the just the general vibe of the movie, like the psychedelic,
yeah,
unsettling, neither here nor there vibe, that's also something may have accidentally crept in a little bit on Changeling, could have been, because that's definitely the vibe on the album on a lot of tracks. So
I could see that.
yeah, yeah, I could see Abyss, the song,
Hmm.
play in the background of that movie and fitting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I
But to go back, sorry, you were gonna say something,
Oh, I was just gonna say on Abyss, like just that stompy kind of rhythm, like makes me think of like Shadow of the Colossus or something, just some giant creature just lumbering.
right?
I love those kind of rhythms. Almost like Vacuity by Gojira. Um
Yeah,
Meshuggah
I
has
remember that
a
one.
couple songs like that too. Just I don't
Sure.
know. It evokes a kind of vibe for me, and I love that kind of rhythmic idea.
Yeah. Well, for me, that's a Morbid Angel thing, but
That
sure.
too, absolutely, no doubt.
Yeah.
Like God of Emptiness or something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, for sure. And basically the entirety of Gateways to Annihilation. That's
yeah,
for me, that's where it comes from. That's like
awesome.
my gold standard for slow-ish, lumbering, bouncy death metal.
Hell yeah. I've noticed that the fan base of this page is usually pretty divided on Morbid Angel, where it's like the young. It seems
Sure.
like the younger crowd, they're all about like gateways and Covenant and stuff like that, like all the seven string,
As they should.
more rhythmic stuff. And it's like anybody 40 or older usually is into like altars and Blessed Are the Sick and stuff like that, like the more old
Right.
school stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably just a matter of when you discovered the band or
Sure.
any band really. What era of the band is the one that you discovered it with, and then that kind of becomes your internal barometer of that band
Right.
of that sound. And for me, I discovered Morbid Angel with Formulas and Gateways.
Hmm.
Um, and the earlier stuff just didn't appeal to me as much. To
Yeah.
this day, it still doesn't. It's groundbreaking, it's important, but just never, yeah, I was never being able to sit through Blessed Are the Sick in one sitting,
Yeah.
honestly. Not that it's bad, it just, for me, it didn't give me the things that I responded to.
Sure. It's definitely way more steeped in like the thrash inspiration of early like first wave death metal, like for sure. But
Yeah,
also, oh, I was just gonna
sorry.
say also, Trey and Vincent and David Vincent's, obsession with like occult and sounds and kind of, you know, weird sound effect stuff.
Hmm. Well, for me, it's always been an emotional thing. Like this is a general thing that I have with music. Like I don't tend to think in terms of genres
Hmm.
and in terms of, is it this thing? Is it that thing? For me, it's about the emotional journey that it puts me on. Um, and I think it's quite easy to see why that is such an important thing because that's exactly what I'm leaning in the hardest with albums like Changeling always have been. Um, and so to be like an album like Blessed Are the Sick it's cool, it's an important musically groundbreaking thing, sure. But emotionally, in terms of storytelling, it gives me similar versions of the same thing for 45 minutes.
Yeah, that's fair.
While albums like Formulas and especially Gateways, to me, they are more of a complete arc, especially since the addition of Eric Rutan and
Hmm.
just open up this completely different portal. No, no pun intended. Where just the beauty of it and the melodicism of it when he goes into the slightly neoclassic, like crying harmonies. And I think that opened up their sound so much that that album, Gateways in particular, is just an album I can listen to from start to finish, and I can be taken on a journey in the context of aggressive death metal.
Yeah.
And I think that's for me what it's really about. So I really don't care. Like there could be like a bossa nova number in the middle of it.
Yeah.
If it just takes me on journey that makes sense in the context of the album, and I enjoy that storytelling, I'm down with it. I don't care if it's death metal or I don't know, Estonian hip hop.
That with that said, we'll get back to gear eventually, but with
Sure.
that said, what are some of your biggest influences? Is it like literally just a wide range of things like that at all times?
Yeah,
Or-
pretty much, I would say. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think that's also like, for example, you mentioned Defeated Sanity. I never really fit in with that group either. Like they're one of my favorite bands of all time. Now Lil is a good friend, and Jacob and I we've been going way back, so love these guys. But also like that's a group of people that's like death metal, right?
Yeah.
And that's cool. Like they're so I could never get into the specifics of that sub style, how they operate. I when they talk about, Suffocation, second album, third track, 140 in it, there's like this one pitch harmonic. It's like, dude, I'm out. My brain doesn't work like that.
Sure.
And so by the same token, like I gravitate to the complete opposite. I I paint in bigger brush strokes than that, which is not a value at all, not placing any value. It's a completely different thing that I'm going for. And also as a music listener, um, I operate differently and I can find inspiration in, like I said, if there's like an Estonian hip hop group that does something that I haven't heard before, like a combination of sounds and storytelling that's like, oh, what was that?
Yeah.
I will, I will bring that into my train of thought, into my continuum of how I approach music. And so, like for example, a song like Abyss from Changeling. If I just were to rattle off the direct influences on that track, it's Morbid Angel, 100%, but it's also Giorgio Ligeti, the classical composer.
Okay.
It's Jacob Collier, it's Stevie, it's Nevermore, it's Nine Inch Nails, it's The Body, and a bunch of other smaller things. So,
Hmm.
and you will find all of those influences 100% in the track. It's not like some esoteric
Yeah.
mumbo jumbo, but it's all literally there. I can point you to the exact things there.
It also it strikes a really interesting balance just to me as I'm listening to it. There are bands where they sound a little bit like, the genre bending
Hmm.
bands, like where it will just abruptly, go from like this crazy blast beaty riff to, all right, now it's like a jazz riff, like clean guitar, like
Right.
very jarring. And it's jarring
Like
on purpose.
Mr. Bungle Fantomas kind of jarring.
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
like some of the other older bands, like I Wrestled a Bear once. I don't know if you remember them.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, where like it is 100% the point to be jarring and just like, oh, we're over here now.
Yeah.
Um, that kind of stuff's fun, but it's really cool. Like with changeling, it all kind of blends these different influences together for a singular vision of what changeling is going to sound like, what this song is going to sound like. Opeth is pretty good about doing that kind of thing, and it in their own way,
Yeah.
obviously.
I think so. Yeah.
But the blending these different styles, techniques, musical ideas, sometimes genres, but all under the filter of Opeth.
Hmm.
I think that's the most challenging, but ultimately the most rewarding way to blend in influences. Where some people, I think, almost kind of miss that, where people get excited over music that they love, and they hear these musical moments in other songs that they love,
Mm.
and they want a moment like that for themselves, so they end up writing something that sounds like a copyright, friendly version of a song they like,
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
and that's their influence. And I know I've done that too in the past. I
I
try to
think we
go,
all do event
sure,
like we
sure.
all need to go through that.
Yeah. And I think inadvertently people will even do that, like subconsciously even, and can't fault them for it. But I think people miss the point of music being self-expression, and it's great to have influences and cool ideas of where you can go, but people forget at the end of the day, it's like, well, is this self-expression? Is this you? Or are you just trying to have a cool, moment like
Right.
your favorite band on your favorite
Yeah.
song, which being derivative can be fun. That's cool too. But is that really artistically fulfilling? You know?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And that's a huge topic for me. Um, Mainly also because I not only for my own musical development, um, because like I said, I've never felt part of any club. I always felt like an outsider in the music business, in any scene. And part of that is that I always had a very particular vision, for
Mhm.
better or worse. And that vision always rubbed elbows with everybody else. Um, and when I was younger, I just didn't understand it,
Yeah.
why that was. And then, eventually you gain the confidence to just make that your main focus because then you accept that it's good and it's worthy and there's a reason that you have that particular vision just by way of the way of you how you experience and see and then see the world and then channel your experiences in music. It's very personal that way. And then what I started doing during the pandemic is to coach people on creative blockages, emotional and mental health, artists in particular. So that's been my side gig now for the past couple of years, which I find extremely fulfilling. And why I'm bringing this up, except for blatant self promotion, is that I see this all the time that people run into blocks, into walls with what they're doing, and they feel limited in their creativity. They feel stuck in their career. They feel like they can't express themselves in their songwriting, in their guitar playing, whatever it is. And oftentimes, what I think is happening is that they're not really aware of what their actual motivations are. Like, is their motivation to create diminishing returns of something that influence them, right? Which is kind of cannibalistic in a way,
Yeah.
because you're taking something, you're not adding to it, and you're expecting there to be a return, the same return that your heroes, the influencers, got from creating something unique to them, which takes vulnerability and is a scary thing.
Yeah.
And then you're taking that thing. There's no vulnerability in that. There's no scary element because you're just literally taking something that's already proven to work. And then you are like, okay, so this is the same thing again, but with our label on it. So would you like it, please? And a lot of times that puts people, without them realizing it for a long time, puts them in this position where they think their motivation is creativity and self-expression, but it's actually not. It's just to be liked,
Yeah.
right? And that can create a lot of problems if those core motivations are not untangled and dragged into the light and then subsequently resolved.
Yeah.
So that's why, yeah, sorry for the side tangent, but I think that's super important to know why are you doing what you're doing,
Right.
right?
No, it's
So
a
for Defeated Sanity,
yeah.
it's obvious. Like they love death metal so fucking much that it's like Lilith's mission to present like also personalized, but like a hyper quality
Mhm.
version of death metal,
Yeah.
like a reference thing. And I think that's super commendable, because then you also have to compete with all of death metal, right?
Yeah.
So there's many different ways to get there, to get to your own thing, I think. But for me, it's always been kind of that scene in Dune where Paul Atreides is like, our enemies are all around us, but there's a narrow way through. That's kind of how I see it. Like there's so many things around you, but there's always a very narrow path that's completely uniquely yours artistically. And if you can find that, I think it really doesn't matter what it is and what people think of it.
Yeah,
It just, it will be something that's uniquely yours and then that's rewarding in a very particular way.
absolutely. Um, Kind of steering this back a little bit here.
Yeah.
Uh, where did your early beginnings as far as influence come from? Like, what were some of your, like, when did you start playing guitar, and what were your influences at that time?
Well, I started playing classical guitar when I was a kid, 6, 7, 9, around that time. I don't even remember. So started playing classical music, reading music, playing classical material off the page, finger picking everything. Um, and then I got bored because I felt it was just limiting.
Mm-hmm.
Kid stuff. I wanted to go skateboarding instead. Um, but then at home, my dad used to be a musician, and there was old prog rock, blues rock, hard rock, like not really metal, but you know, there's there was an abundance of Genesis and Mike Oldfield and Yes, things like that in the house. So those were like the earliest music that I soaked up. And then when I grew a little bit older, then I discovered Joe Satriani.
Hmm.
Sure, you remember him, right?
Oh, I
Lord
have a
Voldemort,
greatest hits CD over there behind me.
right? Yeah, cool. So, yeah, that blew the door open for me. Like, okay, guitar, virtuoso guitar. That suddenly that felt like this is what I want to do with the rest of my life. And then from that, really quickly, I discovered death metal, um, prog metal, jazz, all kinds of avant-garde classical music. It just opened up like in all directions from
Yeah.
that. And so even as a teenager, I would be listening to basically everything that would come my way and I would find interesting. And I remember having like my very first band when I was 17, 18 was we were covering Pantera and the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Oh, wow.
And um we would soak up James Brown as much as we did Dream Theater. And the band was shit. Like, don't get me wrong, it was not some elite thing. It was a shit band. But no offense to the people in the band who are awesome, but just, we sucked. We were like a school band. But even then it was anything goes.
Yeah. Sounds like sounds like we had somewhat similar upbringings. Like
Oh yeah?
I had as much Hank Williams Jr. in the house as I did like Frank
Uh,
Zappa and Sabbath.
cool.
Like it was a little all over the place. Another
Yeah.
talking conversation point I've had with people here lately is musicians also being able to appreciate stuff that may be slightly outside their lane. Um, you know, uh, I can't tell you how many metalheads I've talked to that say, "Oh, this band sucks," or "that singer sucks," or "so and so sucks." And it's like, really? Why?
Yeah,
Just because they don't play the same style that you listen to all the time?
exactly. Yeah.
Like just because it's not like the most underground thing ever, it's like some pop band or pop rock band or something, or a classic band. It's like they're where they're at for a reason. Those songs are, you know, we'll take the Beatles for example, or yeah, we'll just go with the Beatles.
Yeah.
There's a lot of even Carl Sanders from Nile said that there's a lot of important songwriting lessons that can be derived from the Beatles. Nile doesn't
That's
sound
absolutely correct.
anything like the Beatles, but
Yeah.
like just to have an open mind, and us as musicians, like we're all going through basically the same thing. How can you not at least stop and appreciate somebody, something that somebody else is doing in a different genre or
Yeah.
style? just because, yeah,
for sure. Can I say something controversial?
sure.
So I
About
think
Obscura? No, I'm just kidding. I'm
nah,
kidding.
like
I'm kidding.
I don't think at this point anything about what I say about that topic will be controversial. But no, what I'm trying to say or want to say is the following. I think that um, metal musicians a lot of times um, are or have been in like this very insular mindset. It was like we're doing metal, fuck all y'all.
Yeah.
It's like um, a lot of people that I've come to know in the metal space are at thinking that it's a rebellious, cool act to not know what they're doing,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so it's like, yeah, metal, that's the shit. And it's like, yeah, okay, it is fantastic music. It's the music I also love, and want to do. However, in metal, there's especially in the older generation of metal musicians, there's a lot of people who don't really know about music in a holistic sense. They don't really know about arrangement. They can't. What I and this is sounding arrogant probably. It's not really meant that way. But what I'm saying is there's different schools of thought when it comes to being a musician. Obviously there's people who are extremely intellectualizing everything, and then uh, they don't really understand the emotional quality of something. It's just, if it's C major 7 plus 9, blah, 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 then we're talking. It has to
Sure.
be a certain level of intellectual, musical, theoretical complexity to be of value, right? And then there's people on the other side of the spectrum. And I find those to be metalheads a lot of the time. There's also such a thing in hip hop as I've seen, but definitely in metal, it's a theme that people are like, I don't want to know theory. I don't want to
Yeah.
know this because I just want to play metal. It's like I get that, but what it's about is really having a broader sense of music, where as a player of music, as a musician, doesn't you don't have to be a professional musician, but if you are playing music, if that's what you do and you like to be doing, then you should be able to see the correlations between all these different styles of music because they
Right.
are there. Just like Carl pointed out with the Beatles, there is a correlation between Nile and the Beatles, 100%. It's
Sure.
not obvious, but take it from the man himself. Like, there's how you arrange a piece of music, the difference between composition, songwriting, arrangement, orchestration, production, mixing, all these different areas of music, how those correlate, where they differ, and how these different, what we interpret and know as genres, where they have similarities, where they have differences. To know about that sort of stuff makes you a better musician. It doesn't change at all what you are, what your vision is and what your product is going to be at the end of the day. But I find that in metal, a lot of people are like putting up the blinders, and they don't want to see the correlations. They don't want to know that their favorite metal song is basically not that far removed from
Yeah.
something that they dislike,
Right.
right? And so I think we all benefit from having a broader sense of music.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what
Absolutely.
I'm saying. That's the hot take.
Yeah. Yeah. It's another comparison that we've made on the show several times now is horror movies. Like there are the people that just want Friday the 13th, which is, as much as I
Mm,
love it, that is some almost bottom shelf level cinema. Um, there's definitely worse, but
for sure.
it's endearing, it's fun, but it's trash, and we love it for being trash,
Mm,
right? But it's still trash. Um, and so that's the one spectrum, that's the one end, right? And then you have the people that are more into Hereditary,
Mm.
or
Awesome movie.
oh yeah, um, what do they call it? Elevated horror is the term that gets thrown around a lot now. And there's camps on either side that don't like the other whatsoever. There are horror directors that say that they don't write horror movies like Ty West. He said X and Pearl and some of his movies, or it's like, oh, I don't make horror movies. Okay, sure you don't, but you know, um,
I can see what he's trying to say though, for sure.
yeah, I
I'm not
get,
writing death metal music either.
yeah, yeah, but it's I guess that's another way to also bring out that the people on the other end of the spectrum, like you said, sometimes they can forget the emotional context of what it is that they're trying to do, where it becomes almost formulaic, or they're too almost get too inside their own head with the technical, or the theory of it, whether it's
Yeah.
film or music, and it's like they kind of lose a little bit of something. um so trying to, and I think you do a great job of this, where
Well, thank you.
um it's elevated, it's pushing in the right, trying to push things further, trying to do things outside the box and different, but it still has identity. It is still emotionally charged. It's it goes somewhere. It's a it's a very, it seems like it's a very difficult line to try to walk, at least for a lot of people, because a lot of times it does, you know there's bands out there that I won't name, that it does feel like they're just trying to fit into what is a progressive band nowadays. Like
Yeah,
there's
and then
almost like
by
a,
definition, that's not progressive.
exactly, like there's like a mold that they think that they have to be in, to be a prog metal or tech death band or whatever. And really they wind up just sounding like a bunch of other bands, or like X band, you know. But
Yeah. And I mean, also, there's nothing wrong with that per se. If you want to imitate or even build upon like an existing framework or something and really nail that aesthetic,
yeah,
that can be very enjoyable.
yeah. If somebody wants
But
to just
just
be,
don't call it progressive, is what I'm saying.
yeah. Well, it's like, it goes back to what we were saying earlier. Like, it's fine if somebody wants to even be in a straight up tribute band, right?
100%.
Like that's cool. That's fun. And at the end of the day, fun or self expression, whatever your goal is, as long as you're happy doing what you're doing,
Yeah.
that's great. I wouldn't be opposed to being in a tribute band. That sounds like fun for the right band. Um, it would take some of the thinking out of it, which that sounds kind of fun too. But it, you know, if you're in, like, and this is the most extreme scenario, this is more than derivative. If you're in a straight up tribute band, well then, you know, you have to you have to also say, is that artistically fulfilling? Is that my self-expression? Is that my vision? Am I, you're not writing anything, or, even if you're derivative, are you really writing it, or are you just reworking your favorite riffs? And you have to say to yourself, is that fulfilling to you? Is that, you know,
Yeah.
little existential mumbo jumbo?
But on that topic, what would a tribute band be that you join? Like, what would be the band that you're referencing then?
uh I've always thrown out there, I would join a Rammstein tribute band in a heartbeat.
Wow. Okay, didn't see that one coming.
No one does.
Okay.
I
Why?
Well, I've always, since like middle school, I've been an unapologetic Rammstein fanboy. I've always loved that band. And like their live shows are so fun that I think a cool, proper tribute band where they're even doing like half the pyrotechnics and theatrics,
Yeah.
that sounds like a blast, like
Yeah.
pun intended. Like, um, yeah. other than that,
That's
maybe
cool. Yeah.
something more straightforward, maybe like a Metallica tribute band or, something kind of classic like that.
Mm,
That would be a lot of fun, I think, you know. But
nice.
how about you?
I,
If you did a tribute band for fun, like,
that's difficult. Um, I could see myself doing a bunch of different bands and enjoy trying to nail that aesthetic as much as possible.
yeah.
Because that's really not what I do most of the time. So for me, that would be like a cool challenge if I can get closer and closer to that.
Hmm.
Something like Maiden would actually be fun,
Yeah,
uh,
that would be
because
fun.
that's so specific, right?
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
the timing of things and how that aesthetic works. Um, if it's about my favorite band, I would be I would join a Biffy Clyro tribute band in a heartbeat because that's my absolute favorite band of the last 15 years or so.
Okay.
So just getting to enjoy playing the best songs in the world to me
Yeah,
personally, because to me they are the gods of pop rock songwriting.
yeah.
That would be fun.
On that note, I think I would almost rather do a cover band, like, but of like a specific kind of.
What's the difference between a tribute band and a cover band, though?
Well, a tribute band is like you're like look at a Kiss tribute band, like where
Hmm.
they'll play nothing but Kiss songs. They dress like them. They try to put on a show that's like kind of paying homage to a specific band.
Right,
Whereas a
and
cover
then
band, like, oh,
all
we
over the
do,
place.
yeah, do a bunch of 80s songs or something,
Right. Okay. Okay.
like
Yeah.
a kind of a broad, broad scope. That would be fun too.
Cool. Yeah.
Um, I, I it kind of dawned on me. I guess I technically have done a tribute band. Um, so whenever I went to Marshall University for like a year and some change for jazz guitar.
Hmm.
And my first year, the kind of year end final for jazz combo, um, might have been a semester final. I can't remember, but we had a set that was nothing but Miles Davis tunes from the album some kind of blue.
Kind of blue. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of blue. We did nothing but yeah, songs from that. Um like we did So
Respectable.
What, we did Kind of Blue, all that stuff. And so I guess and we actually all the jazz combos we played at a local bar, like actually on stage for people, and
Yeah.
like they're random, like some of my random friends were there that didn't even know I was going to be there. And like so it was cool, and I got to have beers with my teacher and everything. Like it was a very interesting final, but it's like, yeah, okay, got to be in a Miles Davis tribute band. And
Interesting. That's definitely a step up quality wise from the cover band that I was in way back in the day.
yeah, I guess I did do a like a middle school talent show where we did a cover song to like my very first band ever,
Mhm.
but which I don't even know if I don't know if I've shared that on this show before or not, where I had a middle school band. We covered Remedy by the band Seether.
Yeah, that kind of rings a bell. That's like mid 2000s
Yeah.
art rock, grungy kind of stuff, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
They were like the early 2000s Hot Topic equivalent. Like you could tell that they grew up listening to a lot of Nirvana and
Hmm.
really wanted to be Nirvana, but they were also sort of gothy and
Right.
yeah, it
Okay.
was a little cringe. It's like some wallet chain Hot Topic kind of kind of stuff. But hey, I was in
Right.
middle school, you know.
Yeah. I
that's
mean,
that's when that kind of stuff was usually cool.
we all need to embrace the different phases we go through and just it's all good,
For sure.
you
Um
know.
uh God. I can say though, I never wore those goth pants like with the bright colors and chains all over them. I never went that far at least. I don't know. Do you know what I'm talking about? Those trip
Yeah,
pants.
for sure. But that's like very that those phases
Yeah,
were very outside of my personal life experience because
sure.
I always like doing my thing.
Fair enough.
I never was part of any of those crowds.
You're better off.
It
Now,
is
now,
what it is. Like
yeah,
there were times I wished I could have belonged, and
sure.
now it's like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah. No, less embarrassing photos that way. Like I'm sure there's one of me wearing a Slipknot hat and a t-shirt at the same time and just like who are you trying to impress, dude? You know?
Yeah, yeah. I have no judgment for that. It's all
Right.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, one thing I wanted to address, which hopefully like the people that are only tuning in for gear haven't tuned out by now, but um one thing I wanted to address, it's very unique to you, is the whole fretless guitar thing. Um,
Yeah.
prior to you, really Bumblefoot was really one of the few guys I could think of that was super into the fretless. And I think
Yeah.
Guthrie Govan has done some fretless stuff.
He has, yeah, but it's kind of like apples and oranges. And just for the record, so cool that you're mentioning that because Ron Bumblefoot Fall, he's also one of my absolute heroes. And he is the one who inspired me to go fretless in the first place, way back when he was only just starting to experiment with that.
Yeah.
Just on a quick side tangent, when I was a teenager, my dad was operating a vinyl record shop in our little hometown. And so I had kind of hit the main line as a music nerd, and I could just go through magazines and be like, "Hey, Dad, this album, can you get it?" He's like, "Okay, sure." And then through his network, he would just get me the albums, not for free, but still.
Yeah.
And so I got to hear some of the nerdiest, most underground shit that I was interested in. And then I was also the type of person who would get an album and then study the thanks lists and the album credits religiously and then be like, okay, this person that this band is thanking here, I remember that name from this other band and that album. And so make
Yeah.
correlations like that and discover new things that way. So um, Bumblefoot was one of those people that I discovered when he was basically a nobody in New
Yeah.
York making weird music and then putting it out to just a few people online. And he had just started to experiment with fretless guitar and make his first couple of recordings with that. And his first album that featured that, I got a hold of that just when it came out. And it blew my mind.
Yeah.
And like looking back now, he's also just trying to figure out how this instrument is to be incorporated into what he's doing. Like he's on such a insanely higher level now back then, but it was enough to really make me go, "Wow, this
Yeah.
is cool." And then through a little turn of fate, just very recently after discovering what he was doing, my main guitar broke on stage.
Mm.
And long story short, I ended up having a guy make it fretless.
Yeah.
And so it was just right place, right time. And that was over 20 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Way over 20 years ago. Fuck, I'm old. And Ron is still the greatest. And, he's still pushing the envelope. And Guthrie, I think, is just a different beast because he also used the fretless guitar a bunch, and there's this famous video of him playing fretless guitar that many people reference. And I have I'm a bit touchy about that because Guthrie is fucking amazing. We all know that he's one of the greatest guitar players that ever lived, in
Yeah.
the universe. Um, and he's amazing and on fretless guitar as well. But what he does in that video and what he's been doing a ton of times is basically play slide guitar, imitate slide guitar on the fretless guitar.
Right.
And so I think it caused a ton of people, like we're not talking 50 people, we're talking millions of people to be like,
Yeah.
okay, fretless guitar exists. that's what it sounds like. And obviously he did not intend for that.
Yeah.
Um, but that's why I'm saying I'm a bit touchy about that specific thing. Guthrie is unbelievable and he can play anything. But many people still think fretless guitar. Okay, so it's like slide guitar. Like um,
Yeah.
what happens if you play with a slide? That the sound that you get, that's the sound you get from a fretless guitar. In reality, fretless guitar is just like regular guitar. You can do it can create sounds like My Bloody Valentine, like
Right.
like Iron Maiden, like the Sex Pistols, like whatever it is. Like there's such a huge spectrum of sounds that the electric guitar has produced in the last 60 years or so,
Yeah.
or 70, 80. Um, right? From Les Paul to Nine Inch Nails. Like it's a
Yeah.
huge spectrum of different sounds and timbres. And so fretless guitar is also like that. It can do a lot of different things if you know how. And I think that's been sorry for hijacking your question, but it's I'm like out and proud trying to make people aware of the different possibilities of that instrument.
Right. No, I definitely hear what you're talking about. Like I remember the Guthrie video and it's yeah, it's like a workaround for slide guitar for him. But Bumblefoot, his approach did not sound like that to me at all. Uh,
Yeah,
it probably sounds like an overly obvious thing, but it's no different to me than like the fretless bass, like which I feel like is maybe a little bit more well known of by this point, or
yeah,
people have heard it
sure.
and seen it more, like especially like Steve DiGiorgio with some of the early like Death records and things like that. And it's been pretty well adopted by a fair amount of tech bands, like Beyond Creation and stuff like that.
Sure. Yeah. I
And
mean, Obscura, one of the poster boy bands for always having fretless bass.
you said their name. I'm just kidding.
It's like,
I'm just kidding.
let's not continue that because if you say it 3 times, then Stefan will magically appear behind me and choke me.
And probably steal a
Sorry.
hard drive of demos or something. You got to
Anyway,
joke about these things.
it's the only sane thing to do at this point.
Yeah. um, which, I'm glad you can have a, bit of a sense of humor about this thing, because
Dude, after 10 years of therapy, it's all good.
yeah. Um, and I don't want to, open up old wounds or anything like that, but you know, I feel like at this point, a lot of people are at the very least way more wary of you know the Obscura situation and Stefan and everything. And
Sure.
I've heard a little bit of an older interview you did when unfortunately you got some backlash over just trying to kind of speak your truth on the situation, and unfortunately yeah, people threw the negativity at you, in my opinion, unjustifiably. um so one, I'm glad that you're maybe a bit more on, I hope, on the other side of that, and you're not really hearing or seeing much of that anymore.
Mm. I mean, if you want to get into that, we can.
That's up to
Um,
you.
no, I mean, it is your interview, and if you are interested in that, we can find a way to talk about that. I don't want to um, make things too much about that because I'm here also for a different, much more positive reason. Um, but yeah,
Well,
just in a nutshell, hmm?
I was just gonna say, well, eh, you know what? Yeah, go ahead and sorry to cut you off there. Go ahead and finish what you were saying. We won't dwell on it because I don't like to give power to. This is gonna sound kind of hippie, but this I don't like to give power to negativity.
Yeah.
Um, I'd like you to go ahead and speak your piece on it, and then we'll move on from it. We don't need to
Cool.
give it any more legs than it needs to.
I
Because
appreciate that. I think that's a good plan.
sure.
Yeah, so just um to talk about what you just brought up, like, hey, seems like you're on the other side of that now. Like, yes and no. So I think the timing of things right now, talking about this issue in 2025, um, is definitely more on the positive side because, we all know that there's other people now who've come forward about the situation around Stefan and that band. We know that like it's widely known now that the fan base is also has caught wind of a lot of shady stuff going on and just turning around, which wasn't the case for many years. So, and then just by pure coincidence, here I am also with Changeling, which is definitely the album that reclaims that particular heritage for me and is also meant to. And it was never intended to be like, okay, once that ship is sinking, I'm gonna jump in and I'm gonna come out with an album and I'm gonna take that. Like it's pure coincidence. Those two things have nothing to do with each other. But so I think it is in a lot of ways it is on people's radar now more than ever. Um, what my contribution was to that band back then, just because here I am promoting an album that's out now that people seem to really like in that sub scene, that also decidedly brings back and references a bunch of things from that album that I've done with Obscura. Um, but on the other hand, like to this day, I still get messages being like, "Wait, that wasn't somebody else on that album? That was you? I just only somebody told me about this just now." So I've been for 10 years, I've been um I've never meant to make this more than it was. Like I've did this album. I'm very proud of what I did on this one album. It was very successful. And but I never meant for it to be like this all-encompassing battle that I had to face for then 10 years later. But it was an album that I put everything into that I had at the time, probably more than I had. Like I exhausted every little thing I had to give on that album. Um, and then the fact that for the past 10 years, it's been made impossible for me to capitalize on that, and that I still have to explain to people what it actually was that I did on that album and what I didn't. And that so many positive things came for other people, but from that album, who are also very capable and very, great musicians, everything. But the things that I helped create on that album, that I made possible, which is not saying that other people did also not contribute greatly and did great things, but just the things that I brought to the table, I never got to capitalize on that. And that is something that's been weighing heavy on me for the past 10 years. And
Yeah.
it's like there hasn't been a single week where the internet hasn't has forgotten about that. Like somebody always comes out of the woodwork um, that is not aware of that story. And I've been fighting for pure fucking survival in the music industry for the past 10 years. That's the
Yeah.
truth, right? And so every time there's somebody who reaches out on whatever Instagram or something, it's like, hey, was that you on that album? Because I've heard this weird rumor, but like I've looked it up online and blah blah blah. And it's like, what? Um, but you're not in the video. There's no videos of you playing it. And like you have to explain to people that there's a psychopath who's been stalking me for the past 10 years, who has been deleting even fan footage of me playing those songs again and again and again and again. And all those people are also potentially my fans. That doesn't mean that they can't be fans of what everybody else is doing, but just this is also my livelihood. And that was made next to impossible for me for many years. And so I want to, now I'm dragging this out longer than we both intended, but it is, I spend a lot of time in different therapies on and off to get to grips with that and just uncover my part in it and, just move on from that and just transmute that and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
But the fact remains that this has been a very, very heavy um, black spot on my career, which has been holding me back for 10 years of my life. And I will not let that go. And I'm just saying, like, I don't need to drag anybody into it or just make this a
Yeah.
big thing. And I hope that also now with Changeling that can put a closing thing on that. But I will not just go quietly after being silenced and sidelined and blacklisted and whatever, whatever happened in 10 years. When you're a guitar player and this is your whole life and you are doing a um, instructional video for the first time, and then you finally have a publicist because nobody else wants to work with you, after all that kind of stuff happened.
Yeah.
And then that publicist calls into Guitar Player magazine, and then people on the other end of the telephone line are like, yeah, yeah, we know who he is. Like, there's people who really like his playing here, but we can't do anything. Why? Well, because there's a very prominent figure in the German music scene who has been calling here, and they're like specifically telling us not to work with this person. And it's like, so that's why I'm not just letting this go. That's why when the topic comes to it, I don't need to bring it up. But when somebody does, I'm gonna tell them.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing all that. I know,
Yeah,
I know for one, you're probably partly even maybe sick of addressing it. Um, but you know, uh, thank you for clarifying. I always like to give people a platform to, you know, just kind of give their truth, kind of get something
yeah,
out there, right? Like I think everybody deserves to be heard for in situations like this, you know. Um, with that said, the I think the new album is exactly what your intent was, um, where
I
you
think so.
kind of you're coming back better, stronger. It's a statement album in that regard, and I think it absolutely uh, hits everything that you were trying to accomplish. Um, dare I say, I think I enjoy it more than a lot of obscure records, both before and
Cool.
after. like, like you
I
know,
really appreciate that, and thank you for bringing this back on track so eloquently.
yeah. I
Yeah,
try. I'm normally
but yeah,
terrible at segues.
but yeah, it is definitely a statement album. For whatever reason, it's just that's how it happened.
For sure. And man, sorry to kind of go back and forth a little bit here, but
Oh, no worries.
frankly, I've just enjoyed talking to you and kind of delving into these different subjects. It's kind of thrown it off course a little bit, which that's fine.
Well,
We
usually I'm the one trying, like, doing the weird side tangents, so I think we're good here.
all
Don't
right,
worry
good
about it.
deal. Um, I have to go back to asking about the fretless. On
Yeah.
as far as the album goes, what percentage would you say was fretless versus one of your fretted instruments? Which they are, you're playing all RSTDs for Changeling, is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
I don't
Such a cool
think
brand.
Alpha, fantastic. I mean, they're just the best. Except for the acoustic guitars, or every electric guitar sound on the album, except for the guest solos, obviously, is Aristides.
Mhm.
Um, so it's a difficult question to answer. Maybe like 65-35 in favor of fretted.
Okay. Were there were there like actual I kind of pictured it was maybe like a lot of the rhythmic stuff would be a lot of the fretted instruments and a lot of overdub and lead stuff. would be fretless. Would that be fairly accurate, or is it very
Yeah,
mixed up?
both.
Yeah,
It's true, and it sometimes it's not. So
sure.
mostly that is correct. Um, but then there's also a lot of rhythm guitar fretless. For example, the song "Falling in Circles" is completely fretless for the rhythm guitars, and then fretted
Hmm,
for the lead guitars, which is a
interesting.
nightmare on stage. But that's also like part of the creative process of the album. That this time, you know, when I did other albums, like for example, when I did Across, then the name of the game was like, okay, let's bring fretless guitar into death metal for the first time. So let's
Hmm,
even, let's just invent that on the spot. And then you figure out, okay, so what works, what doesn't work. And then 10 years later, if you're doing the same thing again, it's from a different vantage point, right? And
yeah.
so now it was more like, well, I know what works. I've already done it a bunch of times. So let's just have some fun with it and let's try to find interesting combinations that I haven't really done before. Or maybe, which is definitely a thing on Changeling, let's try to push the fretted guitars into territory where people think it's fretless and the other way around.
I got
So a
you.
lot of people, for example, thought that Abyss, the song, is fretless because there's so many bendy
Yeah.
things in there and it's microtonal, but it's actually not. The only fretless guitar in that song is the solo section, right?
Okay.
So that's happening a bunch on the album that fretted guitars are made to do certain things that you would associate with fretless guitars and then the other way around too.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And
And then there's the oud. There's the oud is also a big part of the album, and that's a fretless instrument too. So
okay. I'm not super familiar with the with that oud.
I can show you.
Yeah, please.
Well, that is
Oh,
this
okay.
guy here. Yeah, and it's
Okay, I've seen
probably,
it.
as usual, completely out of tune. Oh yeah, it is. So yeah, but that's the oud that's on the album as well.
Fascinating. Okay. I have seen them, but I'm, definitely did not remember the name. So that is so cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Being a big Carl Sanders fan, I always love seeing like a little bit more uh exotic kind of, acoustic instruments and things like that, especially in, extreme metal. It's so cool.
Yeah.
Um so whenever we're talking about playing these songs live, um what is the train of thought? Is it just you're going to commit to doing completely fretless or completely fretted or change out per song?
Yeah, that's so far that's been the case. Like so I can't current state of affairs is that I can't perform the things exactly like on the album when there's a
Sure.
switch up between instruments. I've talked to Aristides about what the possibility would be of a double neck fretted fretless like Bumblefoot has, but
Yeah,
then
yeah.
for seven string, and they're like, dude, it's way too expensive. So it would cost a five-digit amount of money to
Phew.
just research and development that thing because they would have to create an entirely new body
Mold.
shape for that
Yeah.
mold. And for Aristides, the way that they work, the way that they produce their guitars, that's the make it or break it scenario. You can
Yes.
customize an existing guitar down to the last little thing. That's one
Yeah.
of the coolest things about their guitars. You can do so many crazy things in with their guitars. However, that I if
Yeah.
Mike Stringer, who's like super popular right now with Spirit Box, obviously, if he were to ask that, maybe that's a different story because his band just sells big numbers,
Oh yeah.
right? And so it's a music business, so
Yeah.
I don't have that kind of gravity. I
Sure.
hope I do, and once I if that was the case at some point, I'm sure Aristides would be fair game because they've been so supportive and so cool.
Yeah.
But currently, no, I have to switch, or I'd have to kind of devise an apparatus where there's like a standing fretless
Oh
guitar,
yeah.
and then I just go something like that. In the meantime, I've been performing Abyss. I've been performing World Wide World and Falling in Circles. And so Falling in Circles, I've done all fretless and
Hmm.
then just did a different solo. And Abyss, I've done all fretted on
Okay.
stage.
Okay.
Yeah,
I guess it just like depends on what percentage of fretted or fretless was on the album is the
yeah,
deciding
yeah,
factor. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That makes sense.
If I were to play a song like Anathema, the final track, there's a bunch of fretless guitar on that,
Hmm.
but since it's a 17-minute song and there's fretless here and there and in between, but the main bulk of the song is fretted, then obviously
Yeah.
that would be a fretted song for me.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah.
Which I watched that video clip where you have a side by side of yourself fretted versus fretless,
Yeah.
and it does blend pretty seamlessly together. Like you can hear little nuances if you have like headphones on or something,
Hmm.
because I'm guessing you did left and right.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so you can hear little differences, but for the most part, it's pretty seamless. So I think you
Depends
can
on what
get
you're
away.
doing. It's like if
Sure.
so that's my thing with fretless guitar, right? If you approach fretless guitar like a normal guitar without frets, you're going to be in for a hard time.
Yeah.
If you approach it on its own terms, and if you're like, okay, so what are the strengths and weaknesses,
Yeah.
then you can do things that blend really seamlessly. So it's just, it's a matter of knowing how to get around it. For
Yeah.
example, like if we take the song Abyss, which a lot of people thought was fretless, um, I could, I would have an easier time playing like all the bendy downward band meow things on fretless. That'd be the easiest thing ever. However, once we go to the chorus, which is just ba 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 chords, big
Yeah.
chords, um, that's about the hardest thing you can do on a fretless guitar,
I could see that.
right? Because that's 7 string or 6 string chords.
Yeah.
There's so many different notes in those chords that all have to intonate perfectly. And a few of them are open strings, but a few are not. And if you have a chord that requires you to have all 4 fretting fingers on the fretboard intonating, and especially if there's fourths involved, like
Sure.
in power chords when you have like the fifth and then the octave, and there's a fourth between the fifth and the octave, that's a nightmare on
Yeah.
fretless guitar, especially if you're doing it not once but a couple of times. So to intonate that part on a fretless, I don't think it's possible. And even if I had tried, it had like the return of investment would have been pretty minimal,
Right.
right? So I think maybe that's a good example for where the limitations are. And with
Sure.
other things that people may think, oh wow, that sounds very hard to play, but because it's approached in a different way where you can get interval horizontally,
Hmm.
um, you know, something that may be um, let's just say, putting your picking hand in an odd spot because you have to cross strings on a fretless guitar. You just go, "Ba-dup." No. So there are things where the fretless guitar is just a giant advantage, and then if you find those things and you work with those, then you can get a seamless blend. So I
Yeah.
would say that it's really not just about trying to get good on the fretless guitar and then
Yeah.
just trying to match the fretted things, but it's also about leaving out certain things in the fretted parts that would not match well with the fretless guitar.
Right.
Yeah.
And I I don't know why it kind of puts me in mind of, I guess, a struggle. Not that obviously, like we talked about, not that there's a direct correlation with slide guitar, but it just makes me think of this, like why a lot of slide players will go to an open tuning, um, just to make it a little bit easier as far as like intonation, and also
Mhm.
kind of keeping everything in line since they are moving basically in a straight line up and down the neck. Um,
Yeah, absolutely. Same thing.
have uh, have you ever looked at some of those microtonal guitar, like fretted guitar necks that have like twice as many frets as a regular guitar, things like that?
Yeah, sure. I'm not super interested in that. I
Hmm.
am very interested in microtonal music for
Sure,
sure. Um, but as a fretless guy, that's really kind of meh for me.
sure.
Because I can get there,
Yeah,
so I don't need. For me, it's very different instruments. If
right.
I have a regular fretted guitar, my struggle is not to make it microtonal.
Oh
You
yeah.
know, I can do that. That's not the issue. My struggle is to make it perfectly in tune. I can tell you, like for the Atmos version of the album, I had to quad track the entire album because on the CD, on the stereo version, it's double
Yeah.
tracked left and right, so there's no quad tracking. But then for the Atmos version, I recorded two additional rhythm guitar tracks,
Yeah.
and especially on tracks like Abyss, getting those four, one, two, so one, two, three, four, those four rhythm guitar tracks to be perfectly in tune with each other, especially on those big chords, was a nightmare,
Hmm.
absolute nightmare. And so that was harder than quad tracking the fretless guitar parts.
Oh
So
yeah.
that's why I'm saying, like, my struggle, like, microtonal music is super interesting, but my struggle with guitar is not to go microtonal. I'm doing that
Yeah.
anyway. My struggle is to get the fretted guitar parts into intonate as perfectly as I want to play nice with the entire arrangement.
Wow. So
There's
that,
few things that unnerve me to the point that like
oh yeah.
a shittily intonated guitar does.
I'm glad you brought that up because when I saw how you mixed it for Dolby Atmos, I've been fascinated with that too, and have
Cool.
tried watching some videos on it. I know we've been on here a while, so I won't drag this out too long
Dude,
for you,
it's all good. Don't worry about
but
it.
but yeah, I've been fascinated with it. It's I've tried to explain it to people as opposed to just being a stereo field, more omnidirectional kind of thing for people that just don't have no idea what it is. Um,
Omnidirectional is a good term to use for sure. Yeah.
sure, okay,
Yeah, because the sound is the music is happening all around you.
right.
So yeah.
So I in a it's a more accurate version of what people would think of with surround sound, in
Yeah.
that sense. Um, just trying to make it sense in layman's terms. But
No, that's a good way of explaining it. Like most people have heard surround sound at some point if they went
yeah.
to a cinema and then, just had 5.1 or 7.1.
Hmm.
But then surround sound in that way is just basically on a straight line around you,
Hmm.
on an even level, having different sound sources. Dar, 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 right?
Yeah.
Um, and then a subwoofer. So it is surround sound in that you are surrounded by it on ear level.
Hmm.
Um, but the way that's been handled in the past and that's mixed, and then these formats are different from each other, just not very user friendly and
Hmm.
consumer friendly at all. Um, because if you had if you had mixed an album for 5.1, it wouldn't work in 7.1 and the other way around, and you'd have to make different mixes for different formats.
Huh.
Um, and then it is basically using the same mixing formula, the same framework, it's just adding more mono sources.
Wow.
Which can do a lot, but still. And spatial audio, as we're using it now, especially with Dolby Atmos being the most popular version of it, it basically enables you to let things pinpoint exactly in a 3D space around you. you're having like a bubble around you that you can, within that bubble, you can pinpoint exactly where things are. Are they here, right next to you, or are they at the wall? Are they moving from one side? Are they moving up and down? So that's an element we haven't heard before, just
Yeah.
sonically, creatively, until that came along. But also, now it's a different tech technical way of mix. It's a different way of mixing, and it's also a different way of communicating, of the music and the format communicating between the different listening environments.
Yeah.
Meaning that I mix it for Dolby Atmos, and then it really doesn't matter to the format whether you have a 7.1 sound thing going on at your in your home cinema or whatever people use, or you have 5.1, or you just have stereo, or if it's just one kitchen speaker.
Yeah.
If you can play the format, whatever you have available in your listening space will play the format, and that's one of the biggest hurdles that we now gotten over with this format, which I think is fantastic, right? So that
Yeah.
there is one Dolby Atmos mix and everybody can listen to it. Whether they get any benefit over it is that's a different discussion, and there's a lot of misinformation and
Hmm.
frankly gaslighting from companies on that, right?
Right.
Just because it's physically impossible for you to get surround sound experiences from headphones,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Um, and there's really cool technology and formats like binaural that
Yeah.
give you an added sense of things happening around you, and that's
Sure.
cool. But it's not the same thing. So obviously, if you're hearing a Dolby Atmos mix on your headphones at home or on
Hmm.
your sound bar or on your regular stereo system, the cool bit is that you get to hear it in the first place and you don't have to buy or stream or whatever a separate thing. It's
Yeah.
just one file and one source material. That's cool.
That's
But
fascinating.
still, yeah, but
Yeah.
still, just to wrap this up, for to get the experience of what the album actually sounds like, the way that we mixed it, you'd have to be in a 7.1.4 room with ceiling speakers.
Okay.
And so it's like stereo stereo speakers, one center speaker, two side speakers, two rears, one subwoofer, and then four ceiling speakers. That's the setup that I used and that we had available when we did the Dolby Atmos version.
Gotcha.
And
I love
it's
it.
fucking amazing, dude. I don't want to hype it up too much, but it is the coolest thing. I've been working towards this for years, and to
Hmm.
hear that come together, we just had this, myself and Eric, who's been my co-engineer for the Atmos version. We had this thing in Frankfurt. There's a event called MetalCon, organized by, you probably know Christian Kohle from Kohle
Oh
Killer
yeah.
Studio, like big
Yeah.
YouTuber and studio guy, and Nolly was there, and Stefan Bowman, who mixed the newest OPAF, and so it was us crashing into this environment of like these established industry pros, and then presenting Changeling in Atmos, and it was just the coolest thing to. I'm sorry, no, I hope nobody takes offense, but just to crash in there and present a superior product to everybody, being like, what? It's just it's things you just can't buy for money. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So that was a big orangutan moment
Oh
for
yeah.
me. That was awesome.
That's killer. I
Yeah.
I hope I can find a means to be able to listen to that proper. Because like the technology is so fascinating to me, but I haven't just don't have the means to listen to it proper. Um
I mean that's probably not true because if you can stream the Dolby Atmos version um, through Apple Music,
yeah.
and if you have what are the AirPods,
I know like I don't have the
right?
actual brand AirPods. I know that they're supposed to have like binaural technology. Is that
Yeah, exactly. That's the
yeah.
correlation there. But if you just have an Apple Music if you just use Apple Music and
Yeah.
you can play the Atmos version, you just have to click on the Dolby sign if it's available
Mhm.
to you, and then you can play the Atmos version. The thing is just, and that's really difficult, a difficult spot to be in. You have to, in my case, I have to tell people it's awesome and I want everybody to listen to it, but if you don't have any type of surround setup,
Mhm.
please do use the stereo version because that's what it's made for,
Gotcha.
right? Because the thing is that Atmos version, as cool as it is, it's forward thinking the technology is, and as much as I'm in love with the technology, you know, the to leave the translation of all of that information happening around you. And like Changeling is the first metal album on the planet, without a doubt, that is actually using the 360-degree space. I can say that with absolute conviction,
Wow.
um, because it is the first album written for the format. That's the difference. And we just went all out, for example, with the chord tracking to create an experience where you are in the center of the music, literally, and the music is unfolding all around you. And so most Dolby Atmos versions of other albums, even though they may sound fantastic, um, they are happening basically in an exaggerated or augmented stereo. Like for example, the Opeth album that Stefan mixed that he also presented at MetalCon sounds fantastic. Awesome mix, awesome sounding album, super cool. Big fan of Opeth, but it's still like it's a stereo thing in front of
Mhm.
you. And then you have keyboard sounds and effects and like wispy vocals happening around you.
Yeah.
But the music itself is happening in front of you. And
Okay.
so that is the current standard. And Changeling is the first thing that for metal
Right.
that changed that because you are in the center of the music and it is happening all around you. And so point being, if you have the technology to do that, that's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
But then the problem is that the algorithms and the technology behind it, if they make the translation from all of that information down to two speakers for you, and I don't have a say in that, there's probably some things about the album that work really well if you break if that's your listening situation, you're listening to the Atmos version but on headphones or on your stereo system. um, but there's a bunch of things that will just sound better and more punchy and more immediate and clearer in the stereo version because
Mhm.
that version was made for that listening environment. Doesn't mean that
Right.
anybody has to like it. It's just like it's been made for that thing, so you're getting a more accurate representation of that.
Sure. Okay.
Ooh, that was a monologue and a half. Sorry, but I'm just really passionate about this Atmos
No,
topic and
I
about the
love
album.
it. There's not any like studio footage or anything like that of you guys working with it, is there?
Oh, I posted like dozens of in the process videos on my
Okay.
Instagram. Yeah.
Okay.
The thing is you can't hear it. Like if
Oh,
it's me filming on my cell phone, like I will we would be working on it in the
yeah.
studio where we mixed it because I don't have an Atmos setup here in my studio. It's just too expensive.
Gotcha.
Um
I
and
was just gonna
then
say it would be cool to kind of in the vein of like URM Academy, like a really proper breakdown of the entire process of it, just because there's like you said, there's not a whole lot, there's not a whole lot of people
yeah,
working with it to the
that
uh
was the thing we did at MetalCon. We had these two presentations where we broke down the process of how we did it and showed the individual elements in the room with people sitting in the middle of it.
do you know if there's any footage of that?
They definitely filmed that, so I
Okay.
don't. They
I'll
will.
yeah,
The people behind MetalCon will definitely use that in some way. How I can't say.
sure.
But my point is that in the studio when we were mixing it, I would
Hmm.
be on my cell phone being like, okay, so this is coming from over there, this is coming from here, and you could hear Because another thing, are you ready for another monologue? Let's go. One of the things that people don't realize that I didn't realize for a long time until to bring it back to Rammstein, because
Yeah.
I was invited to the latest Rammstein album release party when that happened, um, in Berlin. So one of the many release parties actually, and they played the album in an IMAX cinema in Atmos,
Wow.
and that blew my mind. And there was two things that I realized at the same time listening to the album in Atmos. One, obviously, like very obvious, the creative potential, right? Having the space to place things everywhere. And there is just certain things aesthetically where you're like, once you hear, you're like, well, of course, a female choir would be coming from above. It may sound strange if you haven't experienced it, but once you
Hmm.
do, you're like, yeah, that it just makes sense. My brain accepts this 100%.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, and then the other thing that I instantly realized in that moment was like, hey, wow, wait a second. The problem that we were starting this conversation when you told me about you gating a snare and looking into that.
Oh
The
yeah.
problem that us metal people we face, like it's common knowledge now that metal is the most difficult music to mix, right? Because all this distortion, all this volume, this information, if we're going to albums like Changeling or maybe Flash God Apocalypse or Devin Townsend, where there's just a lot of information, a lot of
Yeah. Oh, hang on, you cut out there for a second.
okay, yeah, I caught that.
Uh,
I think just a little blip in. We're
uh,
back,
yeah, I think as a lot of information was the last thing
right?
before it cut off.
So bands like Changeling, Flash God Apocalypse, Devin Townsend, where
Yeah.
there's many, many different instruments and layers of information happening at the same time in a metal context. They they're very hard to mix because things are fighting for space all the time. There's just not enough space in two speakers to have the the natural versions of all these sounds come through at the same time. Everybody knows this who's ever tried to mix metal. Like you have to limit the frequency response of every instrument.
Yeah.
Everybody low cuts their guitars. Everybody, uses this and this and this and this to solve that conundrum that metal in stereo is just very hard to make sound huge. And
Yeah.
yeah, we struggle with this all the time. And there's people who do amazing with that and just have elevated that to an absolute art form. However, the problem is still the same. And so when I was listening to that Rammstein album in the IMAX theater, suddenly I was like, wait, this is the biggest drum set I've ever heard. This is the biggest guitar sound I've ever heard. This is the biggest bass I've ever heard. This is the biggest vocals. And then it's also a choir and keyboards at the same time. Like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, how?
Yeah.
Um, that was my light bulb moment in that theater at that time, because I just realized, okay, well, because there's all this membrane around me, there's like
Hmm.
all these different speakers. So if you know how, now you can also have allocate way more speaker space to each individual instrument.
Hmm.
And so
Yeah.
you don't need to make all this compromise. Well, it turns
Right.
out it's a bit more complicated than that once you start working in it. But that's the basic idea that I started with. And so you just have to imagine that Changeling, the stereo version, it's like taking all the filters off
Yeah.
all of every single instrument.
Right.
Everything is just more full range and 3D and then happening all around you, because I don't have to have lead guitar compete with the choir there in a similar frequency range. I don't have the bass compete with the kick drum
Yeah.
if I don't want to.
That sounds like it could either be much more liberating or introducing so many more problems.
It's a little bit of both.
Sure.
So it took 6 months for us to get from the planning, let's do this, starting phase to
Hmm.
the final product.
Okay. Wow.
So I was correct in my assessment of what could be done, but the way to get there was presenting so many things that I had not considered and couldn't have anticipated. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, and I'm pretty sure for the next one, taking all of the things that I've learned and that we've learned, um, doing this will just be we're just gonna do it on a higher level then. And
Sure.
probably think people who get to hear the Atmos version and who are in the metal space will also take those ideas and run with them and do their own thing now. Um, but that's the basic gist of it.
Yeah. Well, all very fascinating. I actually am probably going to end up looking up like some kind of surround sound system that could actually, handle it. Um,
Yeah, and maybe you have like a hi-fi store in your area somehow that you can just take the album to and then just have a like a test drive.
unless Best Buy offers that. I live in West
I don't
Virginia.
know.
We are very limited on most things.
Okay. Well,
But that would be cool. Um, well, dude, thank you for sharing that because that actually has been a point of interest, for me personally for a little while. And I've watched videos with guys in studios that were equipped for it and trying to explain it. Meanwhile, I'm like watching and listening on a TV with TV speakers that suck. And it's just,
that's
you
the
know,
problem, right?
right.
Um, yeah. So no worries about me explaining that. It's like uh, one of my favorite sayings that my ex-girlfriend always used to say, "Well, don't threaten me with a good time now." So you gave me the carte blanche to talk about it, and so
Yeah,
I really
exactly.
enjoy that. But yeah, that's the biggest problem, like the translation. Like your people are talking about the format, and then you will receive that information in
Yeah.
formats that don't give you the same information. And to make that translation is, I think, the next logical step that the
Hmm.
industry has to face, especially if at some point, if somebody will come up with a concept of making it physically possible to create an actual surround sound experience on headphones, the whole thing is going to blow open.
Sure. Um,
They're doing it in cars, they're doing it in all sorts of environments. So it is, you know, little by little, it is coming.
right.
But I think the headphone thing is going to be the big one. If somebody figures that out, Atmos is going to be the new stereo. I guarantee it. If that doesn't happen, I don't know.
Right. I you would have to think they got to be close because like, almost in the opposite sense. I'm sure you've seen all the different plugins and software out there that is made for mixing in headphones that like try to emulate
Hmm.
different rooms and control rooms and things like that.
Yeah.
Um, we have such crazy technology for trying to copy and emulate different rooms, whether it's like the slate mics and things like that to configure, your studio monitors or like those for headphone mixing. Like if we can do all that, then it can't be very long before they can figure out, you know, being able to present Atmos in much more common consumer level technology,
Yeah,
like
for sure.
earbuds, headphones,
Uh,
etc. Um,
And it's like, you know, it adds an element that I don't know how to say this. Like, let me give you an example. So at MetalCon, we were hanging out in between sessions with a bunch of mixers.
mhm.
And we were also listening to other people's Atmos mixes to compare and share notes, and it was a really fun time. And there was this one guy, Leo, who played his most recent Atmos mix for like a German um, rap artist. You know, like I don't even know what it's called, like the new school mainstream hip hop stuff, auto tune and like
Oh, okay, yeah.
what used to be called mumble rap was now way mainstream, that kind of
Sure.
thing. So really not something that I enjoy usually. And um, he played us this mix, and the what he did in his Atmos mix, which was really really nice. There was an element of storytelling there that worked independently, but in tandem and combination with the music. And so there was like an added element through the 360-degree space that was super engaging for my brain to
Hmm.
follow, and added an element to this song which I would not have enjoyed
Yeah.
otherwise. And I think that is the thing that people need to experience, this added level of storytelling that they just haven't experienced before. That's also why people still love movies, right? We talked about movies before. It's like the storytelling, how you're being immersed in a good story, how that captures your attention and takes you to a different place for 90 to 120 minutes.
Hmm.
People really enjoy that. Well, we did these Atmos listening sessions here in Berlin in a really good room. Coincidentally, turns out that was the room where that Rammstein album was mixed in.
Yeah.
So anyway, we went there and we hosted these one, 2 day, 1 day each listening sessions where people came in small groups of like up to 10 people and just listen to the album. Nothing else. They came in. We did first half of the album, 5 minute break, second half of the album. And I was scared shitless of people just not holding people's attention, and
Hmm.
then you want them to like enjoy the thing, but
Yeah.
like, and I thought about, are we gonna play the music videos on the screen? Are we gonna take people's phones away? Things like that. And fortunately, Eric, my co-engineer, he was just basically taking away all of those insecurities and like just let it happen. Just relax.
Yeah.
It's gonna be fine. And he was right. And to my absolute surprise, but delight, every single session was sold out, every single seat, and then every every single person who was there was not looking at their phones and engaged in the 60 minutes of, as you know, like really specific um, technical death metal. Like people from all
Yeah.
walks of life some of them had never heard this kind of music ever before.
Hmm.
And they were just all completely wrapped up in this listening experience because I had made sure with this album to create a story.
Yeah.
Like there's a progression. There's like it's a the story elements of the album get magnified tenfold in the space. And how that works was completely holding people's attention for an hour. And that was another light bulb moment for me, like a very proud one, where I realized, well, yes, of course, because
Hmm.
we're telling a good story and people want to hear a good story. And if it's well done and it has this added element where people can follow things happening around them, they're having a good time.
Yeah.
And I think if more people experience that, it's also going to lead to people wanting more of that with different artists, with different possibilities. Like we've only just started scratching the surface. So like a good Atmos mix is like an audio movie, right? Because it takes you to a different place
Yeah.
and wraps and captures your attention in a
It's immersive.
360-degree space. Yeah, the definition of that term. And that's like your attention being captured by a good movie if you do it
Hmm.
right. And I think that has not happened in now I'm gonna do like a proud stance. Like that hasn't happened in metal before until now, until Changeling. But it's like I had this idea for that to happen with this album, and I'm really glad that it's come to fruition now. And I think that other people can do even, can just go further
Yeah.
with that now that we've done that. So
Well, thank you so much for sharing, man. That kind of a
don't
kind of a
threaten me with a good time now.
yeah, kind of a mind blow. Um, and for those of you that haven't really checked into it, or maybe you kind of like brush it off, like, nah, this it's like the next thing. Like you gotta get in on it. Man, we have allotted a pretty good chunk of time for this, so
I
we'll go
haven't
ahead
even
and kind of do our closing
time.
thing. Like
Oh wow.
we always like to close these out. It's just like a fun. What is your Mount Rushmore of extreme bands? Like like a top four, and these are like a personal kind of thing.
Oh man, that's so difficult. Define extreme.
Death metal, black metal, thrash. Like the heavy stuff. Like what are your heavy influences?
Heavy influences. Okay. Um, Strapping Young Lad,
Great answer.
City, Desert Island album, Alien also almost just as good.
Yeah.
Um, Death for sure. Can't live
Hell yeah.
without Human and Symbolic specifically.
Hell yeah.
Um, Individual thought patterns also great. I mean, Andy LaRocque is on Changeling. He's you
Oh, for
know
sure.
he's one of the greatest. But just the songs and the aesthetic of those two other
Hmm.
albums were more important for me personally. So yeah, Death would be number two. Um, I mean, it's an obvious answer because we talked about it in the beginning. Morbid Angel, Gateways to Annihilation.
All right.
I'm not the biggest Morbid Angel fan in the universe like some other
Hmm.
people. Like specifically just for me, that
Yeah.
period in the 90s with Formulas and Gateways especially is just, I think, to me, extremely unique and satisfying and some of the greatest music to come out of the death metal scene ever. Um, oh, what would be number four? That's a tough one. Um, okay, also super obvious answer, but Cynic Focus.
Ah, hell yeah. Basically, Paul Masvidal. Uh, like that could like Paul Masvidal.
Oof, I don't know. I mean, no offense to Paul, he's the greatest, right? But I mean, there's four people on that album who are all extremely talented and
Oh, I just meant
extremely like, influential to me, like all of
sure,
them.
sure.
So,
I just meant, but also because of it was like the Paul Masvidal Death Records wound up being your favorite.
oh yeah, yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. So
Yeah,
lot, which I mean, the I always refer to those Death albums as like the Cynic era because it was basically, you know what I mean? Like
sure. Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's such
so
a
many shared
direct
members.
correlation. But what can I say? I just really enjoyed that specific thing.
Absolutely. Arguably the first real you can make arguments at death, but really cynic and in a synergistic way death were the first examples of death metal going in a more progressive, like boundary pushing kind of way. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's definitely bands that predated that were to my version of it of extreme music, like really extreme. Watchtower being one of them.
yeah.
I know. Control and Resistance is also one of my favorite albums of all time. I think Ron Jarzombek is a genius.
Hmm.
And I tried to transcribe that whole album when I was 15,
Yeah.
16.
Wow.
I would love to see those transcriptions. That was probably completely off the mark, but that was a big influence on me as well. So I think So that's to me that's also part of the extreme metal canon, even though people who hear the vocals will be like, yeah, that's not.
Yeah.
That's a different conversation. But to me, it is part of the conversation as well.
Yeah, sure. No, that's fair. I mean, it's just like trying to include, Black Sabbath into
Yeah.
those conversations as well. Like there's definitely a justifiable argument for it.
Yeah.
Um,
Can I add a super recent one as number five
yeah,
just to not make this like an old fart list?
absolutely.
Um, might be controversial, but knocked loose, a tear in the fabric of time. Fucking phenomenal.
Hell yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Uh, Lots of people really dig them. Um, like a lot, there's been a lot of people I've talked to. I know a lot of people that are fans of this page and everything, or
Hmm.
channel, whatever we are. Uh, no, they're a very popular band. They are great at what they do.
That's a very diplomatic answer.
Personally, maybe not my cup of tea. I'll say
Yeah.
that as like fair as possible. I can appreciate it though. Yeah, like we talked about earlier, it's not my lane, it's not my cup of tea, but I can appreciate what they're doing, and they are very, very good at what they do for
Yeah.
sure.
Have you heard that specific EP, that the Terror in the Fabric of Time?
I I doubt it. I don't believe so.
I I can recommend that because I'm not into like that whole space where
Yeah,
they come from, that whole modern metalcore, whatever
sure.
you want to call it. It's really not my cup of tea either. But that EP blew me away.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of the heaviest, most extreme things I've ever heard. Um,
For a lot of bands in that style, I can always really coming coming from a little bit of a punk and hardcore background, I can definitely appreciate the energy and the attitude of it. And from a production standpoint,
mm,
there's a ton I can appreciate about it because all the recordings sound phenomenal. Great tones and executed flawlessly. Uh, they're definitely I think it's fair to say they're the most prominent figure in their space.
mm,
Uh, so yeah, a lot of good things I can say about them, a lot of elements I can enjoy and
right.
but
But dude, we can't stop there. But like then we need to add a few more just to make it even. So
sure,
then to go back to some classics, Meshuggah. For me personally, Chaos Sphere was the most formative one.
same,
Um, Dillinger Escape Plan, Calculating Infinity.
absolutely, yeah,
Super, super important for me.
yeah. That's a rare band for me where I can enjoy every album pretty
Yeah.
equally, but Calculating Infinity does have something special about it. Like it's undeniable.
It's just an explosion. It's just
Yeah,
like, bam.
yeah. I I would say it represents that idea, like that musical mentality, the best. And on the flip side, like like the other side to Dillinger, Ironworks is a good
Mhm.
example of like how good they can be at songwriting and melodic structure and things like that.
Yeah.
But Calculating Infinity is such a gem in like just pure chaos and dissonance. It's
Hmm.
great and so high energy.
Right. Yeah. Energy is through the roof.
Yeah.
All right, so let's bring in like an extremely underrated uh underground thing. Golem Dreamweaver.
Okay. I don't know them. I'll have to check them out.
So if you can imagine what Gorguts sound like today, but
Okay.
like in an embryonic form 20 years earlier.
Hmm.
So this it's a Berlin thing, it's a Berlin band.
Okay.
And it's almost forgotten in the big grand scheme of death metal now. But I heard that album when I was a teenager, and
Yeah.
there's a Stravinsky cover on it.
Okay. Oh yeah.
And to me, that was a big fucking deal.
Yeah.
And I recently rediscovered this album just by accident, just realizing that the cover artwork was done by Nicholas Sundin, who's also done the layouting and the design for Changeling.
Hmm.
So it's like, oh wow, that's like this awesome correlation. And so I checked it out again, and um, definitely way ahead of its time.
Yeah.
It's not aged that well in a lot of aspects, but it really was a formative album for me that maybe some people might to check out just for the for the completeness of things, to like check out an album by a band. Another controversial hot take, but if Necrophages didn't come around and
Mm,
blew up like they did, I think they could have been that.
okay.
A different aesthetic, but they could have been that German death metal sensation
Yeah.
that then Necrophagist ended up being.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to check them out now.
Yeah. Like
Well,
don't expect too much because it's not like a 10 out of 10 classic album where the songs are just undeniable, like on Symbolic or something. But
okay.
it was like a really, for me, I don't think Changeling would exist, for example, without that me hearing that album way back in the day.
Wow.
And
Okay.
that Stravinsky cover specifically, just giving me the nod, like, okay, well, that's something that you're allowed to do. It's
Yeah.
like, okay, yeah, I hear you, you know.
Hell yeah. Well, Tom, thank you so much for your time. Uh,
Thank you for having me.
yeah. Uh, Changeling, the self-titled album. If you guys haven't heard it, you have to. It is it's technical, it's progressive. Most importantly for a lot of our fan base, it is heavy as shit. Um, it is, yeah, some mind-blowing playing on it. And if you can listen to it proper, like if you got some binaural headphones or something like that to try to enjoy the Atmos mix a little bit better, a little bit closer to how it's meant to be listened to, do that. Um, thank you for the album recommendations. And yeah, anything else you want to plug before we hop off here?
Um, I mean, not really. The album is out. I think I want to say that the vinyl and CD editions are either sold out or almost sold out on the main places.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a dedicated Changeling merchandise page now, which is changelingmerch.bigcartel.com. And we have the vinyl, we have the CD, we have t-shirts, and also the transcription books of the album. There's a bass book, there's a guitar tab book for the entire thing, and also a score book where you can get the full score of the entire album, which I'm wrapping up right now this weekend. So if your audience checks out the album, wants to get it, that's currently the best version to get physical releases of it.
Gotcha, man. Well, Tom, I want to thank you again, and everybody, thank you for tuning in to watch. I will have links down below for everything we've talked about, from merch sites to where you can check out the album and all that
Oh,
fun
sweet.
stuff. So yeah,
Cool,
we'll
man.
see.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully we'll have to do this again sometime. Maybe hopefully for the next Changeling album. Yeah.
Well, this one took 5 years, so let's see. But anytime.
Yeah. Always welcome on the show. But thank you guys for
Awesome.
watching, and we will see you next time. Peace.